And here we're going to look at another watch that I've just acquired, one that I didn't actively seek out, but it appeared, as it were, into my life when a Vietnam veteran contacted me from Asia and said, would I like to buy his Speedmaster that he owned since coming home from that war? And I said, yes, of course. And so he actually sent it to me to look at before we did any talking about the price. And I think it must be because I have a well-known habit of overpaying private people for their single ownership Speedmasters. And this watch absolutely typifies the reasons why. So this watch has been in private ownership. It arrived with this 1171 bracelet, which of course is incorrect for a 69. And I actually removed the bracelet before starting the video because it had terrible spring bars that had no shoulders to them. Let's see if I can find the spring bar with no shoulders. There we go. So that spring bar came out with no shoulders. Now for comparison, this is a spring bar with shoulders that you can get the tool under to lift out, but this had no shoulders, so it was quite a stress to get off. But I got it off, and so here we can remove from the watch the end links and the, always turn a bracelet over, and here you can see the acid etched 633. This was never standard equipment from new on a 70 Speedmaster. They were always engraved. So the other thing to note about this 1171 is it has a square logo, and here on the back 1171/1, so it's a service. So it would suggest that the watch itself has probably been serviced at some point. Wouldn't surprise me. So where do we start? Well, obviously I give it a general look over first and check for no sort of serious issues or damage or anything like that. And in general, as I turn this over and over, there's not a lot wrong. The only thing that I would say is that the bezel shows a lot of damage, and that in a watch like this, it really lets it down. When you think of the value of a top 69 might be $10,000 to $12,000, but the value of a top bezel might be $3,800 to $5,000. So this obviously is not a top watch, and so we're not talking about those figures, but this bezel is a huge proportion of the value of a 69. And this one is not a very good bezel, unfortunately. But it does indicate that the bezel probably is correct to the watch. I mean, true to the original to the watch. But of course, we always start, don't we, with the dial. So what are we looking at here? Well, we're looking at short indices, painted logo, professional, T-Swiss made dial with a step. Now, the sharp-eyed amongst you might notice that the dial has a very, very, very slight hint of brown. It does, and it's no surprise that it does, because the serial is of the 2911 range. And I've got a particularly soft spot for watches in the 2911 serial range because the dials always seem to be attractive. It's that range where we get the lovely swirly galaxy browns and all sorts of other colors. But this one is a black dial with, I would say, a sort of 10% brown secondary color. It's only noticeable if you compare, or you're looking for it. So the dial, what do we think of the dial otherwise? The plots are all even, and they have a slight discoloration towards the more attractive sort of yellowy orange spectrum. Of course, they're not yellow, they're not orange. I'm just talking about the spectrum that they head down. The other spectrums that it could head down, for example, might be green or algae or brown. These are the right on the right spectrum. They're not very far down it, but they're on the right spectrum. The next thing that I would look at is the bezel. So we go dial, bezel, case. And the bezel is, well, it's terrible really, isn't it? It's dot over 90. Obviously, it's an original Amiga bezel. I mean, hardly even have to check. But bad areas of missing paint that will really destroy the value. The case is lovely. I mean, for a watch that's had a long period of private ownership, it's really good. I mean, the edges are really quite sharp, and we'll get some pictures up to show those edges. And there's quite a lot of brushing. Now, the lights that I use are very, very strong. And now I'm going to just refocus onto those edges. What you don't really see in the video is that there's quite a lot of brushing that remains on the sides. The lines here are very, very sharp. Human detritus, always a good sign. And here, these nibbles that we see quite obviously under these lights are almost non-existent when handling the watch in sort of daylight. But we can see the very sharp lines between the junctions of the case. And when I talk about the sharp lines, I'm talking about this line here. The line under here, which shows some evidence of nibbling, and the line across the top here. So now we'll just refocus to the table again. That's because I turned off my auto-focusing because it kept hunting around, and honestly we don't need that. So let's look a little further. The case, we light the case to turn it over and we see the case back. Well, we are missing the hippocampus almost. I mean, we can see vestiges of it and vestiges of the Speedmaster engraving, but it's almost all gone. And this indicates that the watch was indeed worn. Why not? But I don't think it's had any polishing at service, which is very important. What we can also notice is that one of the pushers, this one, has a very, very clean neck, and this one is slightly dirty, so I suspect that one of these was replaced. The crown is a service crown. It's incorrect, and we will change that at our service. So the next thing to do is to open it up, and the way we always open it up is with one of Paul's fantastic openers. This is a aluminium one that Paul made a couple of to try, but he said he prefers making them in brass. See, look, the way the teeth all lock. And never rush when you do this sort of thing. Never rush, there's no need. Now that's nice. The way it opens smoothly, and you know that you can feel the tension sort of release gradually, and that indicates that the gasket might be good. Might be. And it will come off. Now, first thing to say is what a fantastic dust cover. I mean, you've got to take your pleasures where you can find them, but look at that. Compared to the last watch that I opened, which had a terrible dust cover. I mean, it was dirty. I mean, it was just dirty. This is spotless. So, of course, look here. We've got the 145.022.69. This inner case back has no pearlage, which is quite not unheard of. Some have pearlage, some don't. This one doesn't. So now we go to the dust cover. Now, removing these is sometimes easy, sometimes not. And what we want to do is get a blade between the junction. There. Now, that popped off because it's there's quite a bit of tension on this one, which is not always the case. Now that is a fabulous movement. Fabulous. can't tell you how pleased I am to see that movement. Now, why is it fabulous? The first thing, obviously, is that it is spotless and totally clean. All the copper-colored plates and bridges are matching and spotless. The adjustment here is right in the center. The number is clearly visible and without any blurring. The white components, I call them, this long white metal part here, these metal parts here, all spotlessly clean. It's such a good sign. And the last thing that is so wonderful about this is that in spite of being serviced, there is almost no evidence of screw turnings. You only get that if you have a very careful watchmaker who has dressed his screwdrivers and is, works correctly. Now, as you will notice now, I'm putting on my forbidden glove. My wife forbids the glove. She says it makes me look like a serial killer. I use them because I don't want to leave any oils and stuff from my fingers. I should use little finger tots, but I'm away. See how it snaps down? I'm away from the major watch cave. So now we can put this back on. And again, the great thing about the opener is that we can engage it, and on the brass ones they have a little bit more weight than this aluminium one, and you can sort of rotate backwards and allow the weight to guide the case back into the thread. So I rotate it the wrong way, and then once I hear it click down a thread, I know it's engaged, and I can do it up. I won't do it all the way up because I'm still working. So there we have the watch. Now, the great thing is that the gentleman sent me a little bag of parts, most of which were not that great, but what he did send was a 1039 bracelet. So here is the 1039 bracelet, and the correct 516 end links. It's a little shoddy there, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. And there is a lovely engraving on the back with his name commemorating the return from Vietnam. There is also a biblical reference on the inner part of that. So, I mean, a wonderful piece of history there that I think I will greatly enjoy wearing. And it seems like it's in good enough shape just to get right on and wear it. The dial is superb. So when we're looking at, grading this watch for the purposes of my price chart, the dial is not excellent. You can't call it excellent because the plots have very slight discoloration and mismatching, but you can call it very good. You can certainly call it very good. The bezel, well, the bezel is fair. I mean, it's not poor. You can get a lot poorer, but it's fair. The case, well, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better case that's had an owner, so I would call that very good. The movement is excellent, absolutely excellent. As for the minor parts like the hands, well, the hands are all correct. Note that the loom on this is dark on the hands. This is absolutely normal, and it's what I would expect to see in a 69. In other words, darkened loom in the hands and nice loom on the dial. It would not match. If it matches, your first thought ought to be going towards, is this a reloomed watch of some sort? Pushers and crown are probably non-original, and it's a shame about that, but you know, these are service items. The crystal might improve with some polishing. So in general, we got a very nice original watch that is let down only by its bezel in terms of quality, but honestly, no reason to let that stop one. It's all about finding the right price so that the buyer and the seller are both happy, and also don't forget that the buyer and the seller both need to be happy 6 months down the line and not look back on the incident and go, oh my goodness, back then, you know, I was paid too little or I paid too much. So there we have a lovely 145-022-69 just acquired from a gentleman in Asia who survived Vietnam and celebrated it with the purchase of this watch.